Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you all for joining us today to learn about our population estimates. My name is Lloyd Potter. I'm the Texas State Demographer and the director of the Texas Demographic Center. The Texas Demographic Center is the state's source of information about population. We work closely with the legislature and with state agencies, with the public, with businesses, on a range of issues to ensure that they have access to high quality demographic related data and information. We also serve as the liaison to the U.S. Census Bureau. One of our duties as the Demographic Center is to produce population estimates for the state, and we'll be talking about that. But we also do a number of other things. One of our other products is the population projections, which we're working on a new set of projections that we're hoping to release here shortly for the state. But I'm going to stop talking, except I'm just going to say I'm very thankful for everybody that I work with here at the Texas Demographic Center. You see a few of them here on the screen, but you're going to be, you may not be hearing from all of us today, but certainly we are very focused on ensuring that we have data and that we're getting it, good data for you all, and that we're getting it out to you. And also we want to be very responsive as well. And so with that, I'm just going to stop and I think let Monica Cruz jump in here. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Potter, and welcome everyone for our population. Welcome to our Populations Estimates webinar. My name is Monica Cruz, and I serve as the State Data Center Lead here at the Texas Demographic Center. And before we officially begin, I'd like to announce that this webinar will be recorded. So if you prefer not to participate, you may exit the session, and know that this recording will be available this week via our YouTube channel. So I do believe everyone will be muted during this time, and we'll have Q&A after our presentation. So at that time, you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask your questions should you have any. So we'll go ahead and get started now. Our first presenter today is Valeria Alvarez. Valeria serves as the data collection lead for the Texas Demographic Center's Population Estimates and Projections program. She primarily focuses on administering the Texas, our 5 annual surveys, which are sent out to all cities, counties, higher education institutions, and private schools in the state of Texas. She's also responsible for collecting data from other administrative sources at the state and national level. So Ms. Alvarez also assists with responding to requests. So anytime you have data requests, she's the first person to receive them. We all work and support those data requests, but she is our primary contact there for all data requests here at TD. So I'm going to hand it over to Valeria. Go ahead, Valeria. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction, Monica. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so this first slide, Dr. Potter already went over, kind of talks a little bit more about our major function and our services that we offer. So I'll go ahead and skip this for right now. And then as we get started here, I did also want to let everybody know that last year we hosted a webinar that provided an in-depth look at the methodology that we use to produce our population estimates. And a recording of this webinar is linked on our website, and I have a screenshot of where on our website it's found. This is how our website looks currently, but we are going to be changing it up a little bit in the coming days, but you should still find this link on that website. And then a recording of the webinar is also on our website. And it's the link on our website goes to our YouTube page, where you can also find other recorded webinars we've hosted in the past. And we won't be focusing too much on our methodology in today's presentation. So if that's something that you're really curious about, then we highly encourage you to watch that past webinar that we held last year. As part of the data collection process for the production of our estimates, we do administer 5 different annual surveys. Our higher education survey and private school enrollment survey are sent out to educational institutions in October of every year, and these surveys seek to capture school enrollment numbers along with the number of students residing in university-owned housing. In January of every year, we send out our annexation and boundary survey, our survey of new residential units in incorporated places, and our survey of new residential units in unincorporated areas. And these surveys seek to collect information about boundary changes and residential development in cities and in the unincorporated areas of counties. And as a note, in addition to these surveys, we also collect data from other sources, such as administrative data gathered from other state and national agencies. And the data that we gather from our surveys are a crucial component in the production of our estimates, and they help us ensure that we continue to produce accurate population estimates, which means that we really rely on our survey respondents to provide us with this data every year. And something that is important that I want to raise attention to is the fact that we have been seeing declining response rates to our surveys over time. And this graph here just shows you how response rates have fallen for our survey of new residential units in incorporated places over the past decade, with this last survey cycle having less than a 70% response rate. And while a 70% response rate may still seem a bit high to some people, when you take into consideration the fact that we're not receiving survey responses from over 300 cities, this becomes a little bit more of an issue for us, specifically because we depend so much on the data cities can provide us with. No one knows your cities as well as you do, so when we are missing out on this data, it can really hinder our population estimates. And you can also witness a similar trend here in this graph for our survey that we send out to all Texas counties. Response rates have fallen over the past 10 years to about 70 to 75%. Again, ideally, we want this response rate to be a little bit higher because it becomes harder for us to produce population estimates when we're missing data from many of our cities and counties. And this all goes to say that we highly value your participation in responding to our surveys. We know that our surveys are probably not the only ones that you receive, and that you probably send this information out to many other agencies like the Census Bureau or maybe your own COG. But still, we ask that you take the time to respond to our surveys because it really helps us out, and it helps you out in turn when we release our population estimates. And if you wanted to check or update your contact information for your city, your county, or educational institution, please send us an email and we can let you know exactly who we have listed as our contact, as well as how often they have responded to our surveys. Now, to focus a little bit more on the data that we collect from our surveys, this slide here shows you 2 different tables with county rankings based on the number of authorized new residential units. So this data comes directly from our survey of new residential units in incorporated places that we send out to all cities and towns in Texas. And all this data was tabulated using only the surveys that were returned back to us. So the table on the left shows you the county rankings from 2020 through 2023. And at the top of the list is Harris County with over 65,000 new residential units approved during this time frame. And on this list, you can also see several North Texas counties like Collin, Dallas, Tarrant, and Denton counties. And then you can also see some Central Texas counties like Travis, Bear, Williamson. And these are the areas of the state that have seen lots of residential unit development in the last few years and that you can assume have seen high rates of population growth. And the table on the right only displays new authorized units for 2023. And again, Harris County ranks at the top with many of the same counties on this list as well, which may give you an indication of where growth is occurring. And then towards the end of the list is where you start to see the differences, and this may give you a look into where residential unit growth is possibly starting to shift as we move further into the future. And this table here focuses on the city rankings for 2023. And as expected, this list relates to the previous county rankings on the last slide. You can see that major cities such as Houston, Austin, and San Antonio are continuing to approve a large amount of new residential units. And you can also see that there is a lot of development occurring in the North Texas region, as indicated by several North Texas cities, making up about half of the top 10 list. And then the last column on this chart here also lets you see how much of this development is made up by multifamily housing units as opposed to single family homes. So for the majority of the cities on this list, you can see that multifamily units, which consist of duplexes, triplexes, and apartment complexes, they make up the majority of authorized new residential units. So moving on, it is also important for us to track boundary changes across municipalities in Texas so that we can ensure that we are properly accounting for individuals as they move across municipal boundaries in the cases of annexations or de-annexations. So according to survey responses that we received to our annexation and boundary survey, in 2023, there were a total of 372 boundary changes reported to us across Texas municipalities. And the majority of these boundary changes were annexations. So we received record of over 359 annexations that occurred across 150 municipalities. And these annexations had approximately 6,000 residents who were living in these annexed areas. And we also had 13 detachments, also known as de-annexations, reported to us across 12 different municipalities, with really only 3 residents living in those detached areas. And when we produce our population estimates, we also must take into consideration what we call our group quarters population, which is the group, it's a group of unrelated individuals who are residing together. So this includes our students who are attending higher education and living on campus, older individuals who are living in nursing homes, prisons, and etc. So looking at our higher education survey, you can see how the number of students living in university-owned housing has increased over the last few years, particularly as on-campus housing has started to rebound after the pandemic. And in 2023, there were about 150,000 students residing in university-owned housing across the state. And I also wanted to note here that we used to get this data from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. However, the survey that they used to collect this data was discontinued back in 2019. And so we started to administer our own survey at the start of the decade. And then starting in 2022, we were able to secure a collaboration with the THECB where they would endorse our survey to higher education institutions. And this is when you start to see that our survey response really increases now that we have the THECB supporting our efforts. And as mentioned before, we also send out a survey to all private schools in Texas asking for enrollment in grades 1 through 8. And we ask for enrollment in grades 1 through 8 because we assume that the migration of the school-age population is indicative of the migration of the total population. So the assumption is that families with children in grades 1 through 8 are less likely to move during this period in their child's schooling. And according to the data we received from these surveys, there have been some minor changes to enrollment for students in grades 1 through 8 in private school in the last few years. However, also keep in mind that the response rate to this particular survey is relatively low compared to our other surveys, and it has also been trending downwards. So please keep that in mind whenever you look at the trends displayed in this graph. And we also collect administrative data on public school enrollment. So we get this data from the Texas Education Agency, and it is not something that we send out a survey for. So we only get it from administrative data. So this chart here shows you how enrollment in public school for students aged 6 through 14, which is the equivalent of grades 1 through 8, has changed over the last few years. So as you can see, enrollment has generally remained the same. However, there was a slight decrease to a little under 3.6 million in 2023. And in particular, from 2022 to 2023, only 79 counties out of 254 saw an increase in the number of students aged 6 through 14 enrolled in public schools. The majority of counties actually saw a decrease in enrollment. And we're really interested to see how this trend continues in the following years. And moving on to the other end of the population pyramid, we also collect data on Medicare enrollment for individuals aged 65 years and older, and this data helps us estimate the older age population. So there has been a clear upward trend in the last few years in the number of Medicare-aged beneficiaries who are 65 years and older. So from 2022 to 2023, 228 counties saw an increase in the number of Medicare-age beneficiaries. So this helps us see that the older population is really increasing across most of the state. And those were several of the data points that we collect that go a little bit more that go into the production of our population estimates. We do have other data as well. However, those are just the points that I wanted to pull out for today. And I will go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Yu, who will talk a little bit more about the estimates themselves.
Yep. Thank you so much, Valeria. I'm going to transition here while Dr. Yu is getting her slides together. Thanks so much for that overview. Yeah, so now let me introduce, this is Dr. Helen Yu. She serves as our Associate Director and Senior Demographer here at the Texas Demographic Center. And so she leads our population estimates and projections team and will now provide highlights of our 2023 population estimates.
Thank you, Valeria. Thank you, Monica. And as Monica mentioned, once Valeria collected all the data, my colleague Jiangsu and I will get into the production of the estimates. And people who know me probably know that I do love to talk about methodology and everything, the technical details. But today I'm going to spare you of that. So our focus today is to talk about the demographic trends that we have seen in the as reviewed by the new estimates that we have just produced. And then I'm going to move on to talk about how you can access the data, pretty easy. And then I want to also spend a little bit of time to talk about the engagement we have had, and we really want to have more with users and local communities. Okay, let me jump right into the results of the 2023 population estimates. So a quick overview of what we have included. So as Dr. Potter mentioned, producing annual estimates is one of our major function in the Texas Demographic Center. We release those estimates every year in the fall. The latest one that we have released, of course, just the beginning of the week was the vintage 2023 estimates, which include, of course, the estimates of the population for July 2023 and for January 2024. And you can get the data at the state, the county level, and the incorporated place, or in more commonly used terms, city and town level. And at the county level, we also summarize the data to the metropolitan statistical area and the council of government level. In addition to the total population, we also provide or estimate the demographic details by single year of age, by 2 sexes, and 5 race ethnic groups at the county level. So next few slides, I'm going to show you for maybe 1 or 2 slides for each of the, or highlight the results from each of these products, what we have seen. Starting with MSA. So we, in this release, we use the definition from the Census Bureau of the MSA as of July 2023. So I'd like you to bring your attention to this, to pay attention to the differences between different versions of MSAs. The last one we had was, I believe, was the 2020 version. So they don't always differ in terms of counties and things. Sometimes they differ by the number of counties in each MSAs. Sometimes it was just a name change. So pay attention to the definition, especially when you compare time series, to make sure that you're comparing the same areas and same counties. In this particular, in this new one, actually, there's a new MSA added, EcoPass. So in 2020, we had 25 MSAs, but now we're having 26. So as I mentioned, we do release the Texas estimates, but the estimates actually came from the Census Bureau. We don't do a separate estimates for Texas. We use the Census Bureau state estimates as our control and benchmark. So here I listed the top 10 MSAs in terms of population in 2023. And you can see that And then also, you know, of course, all of them I'm showing here had an increase between the April 2020 and July 2023. And by the way, the data I'm going to show in the next few slides are between these periods. Any changes I talk about between 2020 and 2023 are as of these time frame. So they're slightly over 3 years of change, right? So some of the patterns we have seen. So here I listed the population counts in 2020, the first column, and then our estimates as of July 2023. But instead of showing the growth rate, here I'm showing you something else, pretty interesting. The share of their population in the third column in 2023 as of Texas. As you can see, the first two major MSs actually have already accounted half of the state population. That's how big these two areas are. And in the last column, I'm actually showing the growth, like how much of their growth account for the total growth of Texas. So I highlighted the first major or the biggest MSAs in the table. This happened to be in the area later we'll use pretty often. That's called the Texas Triangle. So as you can see that these four areas account for about 69% of the Texas population in 2023. But in terms of growth, they actually account for 84% of the growth between 2020 and 2023, if you add these four numbers together in the last column. So really the growth has been concentrated in these big metropolitan areas. All right, let's move on to county. Across the state, we can see that although Texas has experienced tremendous growth or continue to do that, between 2020 and 2023, the growth was about 4.7 in the state. Despite of that, and many counties have been growing, over 1/3 of the counties in the light beige or yellowish shade are the counties that have lost population. And we have about over 1/3 of the counties that have lost population. So most of the population growth, as I mentioned in the previous slide, are concentrated in the triangle areas formed by the four major or biggest metropolitan areas: Dallas-Fort Worth, Austin-San Antonio, and the Houston area. And these are showing the numeric growth. The next slide gives you a little bit of different perspective. This is percent change between the two time period. And here, a little different pattern emerged because now, if you look at especially the three triangle areas, you will see that in the middle, the color is a little lighter in all these areas. The areas that are experiencing higher population change rates are actually the counties surrounding these central urban counties. We sometimes call them suburban rings. Although the rings may not have been growing at the same speed, right? And it also seems that the rings, however you call it, are expanding to further areas from the center. The rest of Texas, apart from the triangle area looking to your left, west, north Texas, you also see the growth are usually concentrated in the major central counties. So these are county numbers, and then we move on to place. So in this release, we estimated population for 1,228 incorporated places in Texas, a lot of them. A lot of these counties, there's a typo here. Lots of these places, these are number of places. Lots of these places, though, have very small population size, as I have listed under here. as of 2023. So you see majority of them, about close to 1,000 of them actually had population under 10,000, right? So only a number of them are big cities. And in many analyses, the Census Bureau has shown, and we have shown, we use the threshold of 20,000 to show changes. Small areas sometimes, when you do estimates, they tend not to be as reliable as the areas with bigger population. So it's with the sheer size of the number of places and the nature of the small population size, it's actually pretty challenging in estimating the population for Texas places and cities and towns. So as you can see here, most areas in Texas are actually still unincorporated. The white area you see here. To see things more clearly, you usually have to zoom in, and that's what I'm going to do to show you snapshots of different areas. I apologize. To show these areas, I used simple terms to indicate the area. They don't necessarily have any definition. I just go in there, zoom in, and take a snapshot. So if you so they may not they do not have the precise definition as we usually use them. And I use loose terms as, like DFW. So this is the DFW area. Oh, sorry. I'm actually showing the Houston area, sorry. As you can see, so Houston is in the center, but then you see the growth, as I mentioned before, Houston is growing. Lots of the growth are actually outside the Houston area, or the fastest growing cities are outside the Houston area. Very similar to what we have seen in terms of county growth. And so this is actually the Dallas area. I kind of flipped them in the title. Very similar again. So Dallas is in the center. You have Arlington. Fort Worth is growing at a pretty high speed. But then it's really the cities outside these areas in the north and to your west and even down south that you have seen the fastest growth in the area. So quickly moving to the Austin-San Antonio area, same thing. And here, lots of growth in north of Austin and also in between San Antonio and Austin. This is something we have often talked about. Along the I-35 corridor is also where you see lots of cities that are growing at high speed. So this is another clip from the lower Rio Grande Valley. The patterns are similar, although we don't see as much of expansion as the Triangle area, we also do see fast growth around the major central cities there. Let's move on to our next snapshot, El Paso. Again, very similar pattern there, except the growth may not be as expensive as in the Triangle area. The last one is a snapshot of the Panhandle and West Texas areas. Here we don't have, we have many small cities. And the growth rates here, as you can see, judged by the color, are not as high as some of these other areas. Okay, so these are snapshots of the Texas places. Of course, you can access all the data or for all the places in Texas. Moving on, as I mentioned, we also do estimate demographic details at the county level. This one, I'm showing you the Texas, the state. And in this chart, I'm showing you the population by age. The x-axis is age of the population. So each bar is showing you the number of people at each age group. In this chart, I have included two groups, two race ethnic groups. One is the non-Hispanic white and Hispanic. Very interesting pattern here. You can see that at the lower age groups, maybe under 25, under 30, you see more Hispanic population. However, if you look at population 50 and older, you see more non-Hispanic white population, especially around the baby boomer or in the baby boomer generation there. So very distinct pattern. And across county, we also provide these information across the state at the county level. If you look at this map of percent of population 65 and older, you can see that around the triangle areas and in some of the western, the Permian Basin area where the oil fields are, you see lower percentage of population 65 and older. I also want to add a disclaimer. Some of the cities or counties are very small, so the errors associated with it, especially in terms of age estimates, can be high. So, but in the rural areas and in some of the retirement communities, that's where you see very high percentage of population 65 and older. So this is a summary of what I have just talked about. Later in this week, you will have access to the PowerPoints. So hopefully this will help you get a summary of the trends we have seen. All right. Now, let me move on to how you can access the data to do your own analysis. So of course, it's pretty simple. Get on our website. You can either use the link I provided here or go to our main page. Under estimates, you will find this page. You will have access to all the estimates since 2020. So if you scroll down the bar there, you will see 2023, 2022, 2021. And actually, you will also see a new product we put out earlier this year, the InterCensal, which I'm going to mention a little bit later. And you can download all the files, the whole data set, or use our customized table. We have added lots of new features to this page. I'm just going to mention some of them. So as Valeria mentioned before, the webinar recordings from last year and this year, the one we're having today, are going to be available on our website and also on our YouTube channel. We also added suggested citations. We hope that when you use our data, you can cite us. And so the other feature we have added is when you download files now, there will be a pop-up survey questions or a list of 2 questions that ask how you use our data, and also allow you to give more detailed write-in answers too. You can skip the questions and download your files, but I really hope you can provide feedback to us. Your feedback is always important to us. So once you go through the survey questions, you'll be able to download zip files that this time we have included or combined the methodology and the data themselves. So if you only want certain counties, certain age groups, certain places, you can always go to the Customize tool. And this year we have recorded, actually Valeria did that, the tutorial videos to guide you through that. We also have added FAQs. So if you have more questions that we have not answered, you can always contact us, and we may add more FAQs in the list in the future. Lastly, I want to talk about the product we produced early this year, the InterCensal estimates. These are estimates. So usually the estimates you're using now and you have seen before, we usually call them post-censal estimates. They're estimates that have used or utilize the latest or one round of latest census counts. and go from there to estimated the change of population. Every time when a new census is done, Census Bureau would go back and use the two censuses now and try to adjust the areas and of the previous postal census estimates so that they can create a smooth series from one decade to another. This time, there has been a significant delay in the release of the Census Bureau inter-census estimates, so we have produced a interim one for Texas. In fact, today, the Census Bureau is going to release their own inter-census estimates. So keep an eye on that. We'll update our link to link these inter-census estimates to the Census Bureau. So basically, if you want to compare your estimates from last decade to this decade, we recommend you use this data instead of the data you had downloaded before. Okay. So engagement with users and local communities. Of course, we greatly appreciate your responses to our surveys, like Valeria has mentioned, but we have made lots of effort in recent years to engage you more in helping us review our population estimates. In September, we released preliminary estimates and sent out an email to all of the local governments to solicit feedback. You probably have noticed if you are a member of the Texas Municipal League. This is a league of the cities and towns that have included many of the cities in Texas. So we coincide our review period with the time they hold their conference, and hope that at the conference we'll be able to connect with lots of the cities and towns and encourage them to, of course, talk to them in the first place, and then encourage them to respond to or provide feedback to our preliminary population estimates. And so we have received emails and phone calls about those since the release of the preliminary. And I'll talk about more how we incorporate those feedback. And then our final release was as of this, November 4th, early this week. That's after incorporating feedback from the local communities. And another engagement we have been trying to do more is to do webinars to connect with users and local governments. So I'm going to use some time to talk about the feedback we have received this time, what type of feedback we have received, and how we have incorporated them in our final estimates. So one thing that's pretty easy for us to accept is new data. Usually our call for review would prompt cities to provide data that they didn't have a chance to provide to us, especially in the building permit and annexation and boundary survey. We'll always accept new data that way. And some cities say they don't issue building permits, and some of the cities don't. And they want to provide alternative data like utility connections, voter registration, and depending on what you can provide, we will accept it as much as we can. But if some of the cities are here in the audience, we encourage you to provide more than one data point. Usually we prefer that you have the 2020 utility connections, say for example, and then you also have the current utility connections. If you have those data, we are likely, we'll be able to incorporate it into our final estimates. Another line of feedback is alternative estimates that use different methodology. This really depends on what has been provided to us. So some of the estimates, for example, don't start. So in our estimates, we start with the 2020 census and add new housing unit estimates. but some cities have at the point estimates, trying to use data to estimate the current housing stock or housing unit stock, existing housing units. So this often result or sometimes result in different estimates than ours. We sometimes can accept if things match up, if the data you're using, you can support that, and there's evidence to support that, and if there's no building permit data available. And another big difference is lots of the estimates from the local area do direct estimates from housing unit. In our estimates, to ensure that all the counties and places that are comparable, we usually control them to the county and to the state level so that they're consistent across. Lots of the differences came from that. So, so in this case, we'll look at other indicators and then try to decide whether we would revise our estimates or not. And there are also people who have sent in emails to talk about, hey, our cities have been growing. Why are you showing declining? We really appreciate that kind of feedback. It gives us a direction, especially if we have different level of estimates. But to really create a population estimate, we need the actual numbers, our actual data that we can produce estimates from. The last thing that we cannot, something that we cannot accept is actually people have different opinions about the 2020 census count. Some of the cities think they have been undercounted. Unfortunately, this is something we cannot change. As a benchmark, 2020 census has always been our benchmark, and also our base population we have to start from. Although we do encourage you to look out for all the preparations for 2030 when the new census is coming, and to make sure that the 2030 counts are more accurate. Okay, so coming up, we want to do more engagement. As Valeria mentioned before, the 3 very important DDC surveys will be sent out in January. Keep an eye on that. Early 2025, we'll also do a population projection webinar. The projections that Dr. Potter mentioned, that will be the state projections will be released soon, and county projections will probably be released too in early 2025. So keep an eye on our email and newsletter. The next round of 2024 population estimates, again, we plan to release the estimates in September 2025. We'll again also try to coincide our review period with the TML conference. And the final release is expected in November. The other thing that's very exciting is in May we'll have our annual Texas Demographic Conference, and here is a flyer for that. This time is usually we have the conference in Austin. This time we're going to take it on the road. We'll go to North Texas. We'll have the conference in Dallas. So hope you can join us, and we'll be able to see you there in May 2025. All right, with that, I'm going to move on to our Q&A session. Great, I'll send this back to Monica.
Yes, thank you, Helen, and thank you, everyone. That concludes our presentation, and at this time, we are open to any questions you may have. You may either raise your hand, unmute yourself, and ask the question, or you're welcome to type in your questions in the chat. Feel free to do either of those. I know I will while you think about your questions. I do know that we had one question in the chat, and I'm going to see if Helen could respond to this. One of them was when we were discussing the lower response rates that have been occurring over the past several years. there was a question about, why do you think that cities are not responding? I don't know if you want to attempt to answer that question.
I can try to attempt to answer that one. So what I see a lot is it might be because a lot of cities have to do a lot of other surveys, so they're sending this data out to the Census Bureau or to maybe their own COGS, so that it tends to be a burden sometimes that they also have to respond to our survey. And then I know also when we conduct our follow-up calls to people who haven't responded, they tend to confuse our survey with the Census Bureau survey, so that also is an issue. People seem to think they're the same, but they're not. They're two different surveys. And then also another reason might be for cities that don't issue building permits, they think that because they don't issue building permits, they don't need to respond to our survey. But we still need to know that you don't issue building permits, but we also accept data from other sources as well. So just keep that in mind, that even if you don't issue building permits, we still accept some other types of data just to show that you've had growth. And then, of course, just one final thing is on our end, we have typically mailed them out, the surveys in the past, like physically mailed them out, which can be sometimes be an issue for some people who like to do everything online. So that's why we're trying to transition to emails as well.
Great. Thank you, Valeria. I see a question from Pablo Peña. Pablo, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I am planning to write a story about some of these numbers, and I just want to know, do we have an estimate of how many people are moving to Texas per day? I believe I interviewed Mr. Potter sometime in the past year, couple years. He said it was around 1,300 per day. Do we have like an idea of how many people might be moving to Texas each day with this new data?
Helen, would you like to answer that, or Dr. Potter?
Well, I don't know, haven't calculated the number of people moving per day, even though we could do that pretty quickly, but the numbers that you were referring to have to do with population change. So that includes the natural change part, births minus deaths. Generally speaking, about half of our population change is from, well, actually currently it's about half is from domestic migration. But we can definitely get you an estimate of the number of people net moving to Texas, because there are a few people that are moving out of Texas, but we can provide an estimate of the number of average number of people moving per day over the last few years, and get that to you pretty quickly here.
Did we have another question? I'm not seeing everybody yet. There was another hand raised before we continue to other questions in the chat. Any other folks that had their hands raised?
Yes.
Yes.
Monica?
Yes.
Gary Shar. I wanted to follow up on the previous question. I continually hear from various leaders saying that 1,100 people move to Texas every day, or 1,400 people move to Texas every day. What gets lost is how many people leave Texas every day. And my layman's understanding is that the net figure is around 500 people per day. That does not account for births and deaths. I just want to kind of clarify that or follow up.
Yes, so you're right. So the number that Mr. Pena was just commenting about, the 1,300, that's the population change, average population change per day. The 1,300 is for 22 to 23, I think. But that does not break it out into how many people moved here net, meaning in migrants minus out migrants. So the difference between that is what we refer to as net migration. And that's Probably right now it's a little over, I'm sure it's over 500. Then that's what we were just saying. I don't have the number in front of me and we'll calculate it and get it to him. But it's, I think for domestic migration, it's a little over half, I think, of our population change. So it'll be over 500 per day now. Last decade, it was roughly about 500 people per day, but now it's increased a little bit here in the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Your observation is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions? If not, I'm going to transition to the chat questions. One of the questions here is, are population estimates available for download as GIS shapefiles on our website? Helen?
Currently, they are not. We can talk about this, but that's a good idea. So maybe you can talk. We do have GIS people with GIS expertise here. So that's something, if it's useful to the audience, to our users, that's something we can consider producing in the future.
Great. The other question that we have here is, how does TDC decide which places to develop population estimates for? It seems that there's always a few places that have population estimates from TDC that don't have population estimates from the Census Bureau, and vice versa.
That's a very good question. So we usually use the Tiger file, like at least in recent years. We've been trying to, in the fall or in summer, if the Tiger file is released, we'll use the list to create a list of cities we plan to create or produce estimates. Put that in our database. Valeria will be the person who then search to find contact information, especially for the cities that have been changed, added, or added in there. We do have our own database of all the cities. So that's usually how we decide what cities to make or produce estimates for. We don't always get information, especially for new cities. We don't usually or always get information from cities. So this is one source of city list or cities we do population estimates. We also do occasionally hear from cities that are not on the Census Bureau list. But they told us that they have formed a city or incorporated into a city. For those cities, we usually will also try to produce estimates for them if they can provide data to enable us to do that. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Helen. I think we have one more question related to Pablo's question. It was for the areas of Texas that are decreasing in population, do we know where they are moving? The MSA areas of Texas are going out of state, etc. So anybody want to answer that?
So first,
go ahead, Helen.
No.
Go ahead.
For areas, for a specific area, especially at the city level, data may not be available, right? And Dr. Potter, you can chime in if I speak anything wrong or if you have anything to add.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Counties, the certain surveys and Census Bureau do provide some of the data show that from some other analysis, survey analysis and things like that. We have noticed that most of the movements are, within the state, right? Whether you're moving in or moving out or within the state. And like the gentleman who asked the question before, there are people who are moving in and moving out. Usually it's a little easier to measure net. It's a lot harder to detect or try to decide on migration flows. One data that's available or used to be available at the county level is the county-to-county migration flow from the Census Bureau. That sometimes gave us an idea of all the flows where, people are moving from where. It seems that recently the new release hasn't included that. I hope that they don't, and I hope Census Bureau still or keep putting those out. Dr. Potter, I don't know whether you have anything to add.
All right. Well, I think that concludes most of the questions. If any questions come up for any of you out there after this webinar, please feel free to contact us. I'm going to have my colleagues type in our email again in the chat.
I do have the estimated number of net migrants, and this includes domestic and international migrants, of 864 between 2022 and 2023 is the estimated number of migrants per day to Texas, net migrants.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
And
Potter.
we'll follow up with you too, Mr. Pena, and get you that in writing.
Monica, can I quickly mention one thing too? Last webinar, it's the same thing. We didn't have time to answer all the questions, but we have the recording here. We have, following the webinar, emailed the individuals who answered who asked the questions. The answers we have to their questions. So we'll try to do the same thing this year.
We will make sure that anybody who registered for the webinar will receive a link to the recording which will be also placed on our YouTube channel, and as well as having access to the presentation slides. So this concludes our population estimates webinar. We really appreciate everybody here joining us this morning. I want to also thank my colleagues and the population projection estimates and projections team for their hard work. We all collectively help out with this effort, but I want to thank Dr. Helen, you for leading the team and leading this effort. And that concludes our webinar. We thank you all for joining us.